Hello folks, and welcome to an episode covering a new topic of interesting and quite neat stuff that I've come across. So, as I may have mentioned, I have been home alone for a while, and while my darling wife was away in the United States, she took up sewing and found this to be quite an interesting thing to spend her time doing. And me, being an understanding husband with shall we say, quite an affection for gadgets, I thought, let's get us a sewing machine so that we can learn to sew together. So I picked this thing up. This is a Husqvarna Designer Topaz 25. It's quite a neat computerized sewing machine that quite frankly blew me away, because I have not been keeping ashore with the various developments in sewing machine tech. So I thought that my grandma's old green steel beast of a machine was still where it was at. However, I could not be more wrong, because in my absence from studying the field, I find that they have gone and grafted a Game Boy to the thing. They have put all sorts of buttons on it, and as any routine follower of this channel will know, I am a big fan of buttons. It's completely digitalized and has a nice startup sequence. Takes a little while. There you go. And the machine is now up and running. It has a vast collection of interesting features. It has something I didn't even ponder for a second. It has an automatic presser foot down, presser foot up. Now, it might have been obvious, but the presser foot is this little doohickey here, which basically, it's like a foot. It stomps on the fabric to keep it obedient, and then it holds it in place while the needle does the stabbing. It's quite an interesting thing. Let me try and just slot that back on there. And I thought that, hey, it's a machine. This is a channel where I show off machines, so allow me to show this one off. Now, a sewing machine has a variety of different things you need to do to it to get going. Step the first, threading. It's actually a lot easier than you might think. Now then, for the purpose of this exercise, I'm just going to flip this thing up and apply some black thread. I have a nice light blue colored piece of cotton woven fabric that I was going to use as a demo piece, but normally I would end up using white thread for that, but now I will use black thread because it shows up quite clearly, which is normally undesirable unless you're doing something decorative. Threading the machine is just a matter of going under this thread guide, down here, going around, and basically it's just a matter of following the path. Then it just goes down past this thread guide and all the way down, and you will come back up again, far back, and into the pickup lever, or take-up lever I believe, and it'll do a small click noise when it has been grabbed, and then just down to the needle. When the thread goes down to the needle, all you need to do is to take it, find the tiniest little hook just up above the needle, and pull it to the right so it catches into the groove. And then this machine comes with an automatic needle threader, which comes down like that, and it pushes a small hook through the eye of the needle, and it just needs to go in here, get grabbed by the hook, and let's see, a small loop would form. Let's see, it might actually have ruined the thread now. Yeah, look at that, it wrecked the thread. Now I have a stranded thread. That's horrendous. Let's try this again with a nice fresh bit of thread that's not been messed up by the needle threader. This is the price you have to pay for convenience. There you go. And now what the needle threader did is that it has pulled a small loop through the back of the needle. So I can just pull that on through. Threading a sewing machine is always done front to back, because otherwise you'd end up with a thread looped around the needle, and that's a recipe for broken thread and sorrow. So I just pull that straight out the back, and that's the upper thread done. Unlike hand sewing, a sewing machine uses two bits of thread, one for the upper, which is what we just did, and one for the lower, which comes in a small thing called a bobbin, which is basically a little small spool of thread. In fact, in Swedish it's just called a thread spool. So let's have a look at how to install it into a computerized machine with a top-loading bobbin. There are a fair few advantages to a top-loading bobbin, or a top-loading bobbin case rather. One of which is that you can see the amount of thread left. The other is that you don't have to fuss with a bobbin basket or whatever. You just take the bobbin that you have, you drop it in there, you pull it a bit to the right until the thread goes through this little hooky area right there. And then you pull until it goes click, and loop it around the hook at the front, and then Bob's your uncle, and the bobbin thread is now in. So that is about what it takes to get the machine ready for sewing, and that, as we all know, is the cool part. So let's have a few little look-sees at the interesting parts of the actual computerized workings of the machine. Now, this machine is quite notably computerized. All of the various settings on the machine are done not with little switches, or sorry, not switches, but knobs and levers, but it's done through button pushing. For instance, on a straight stitch I can set the length of a seam, and it'll show in reverse video if I have something that's not the default. And I can set the offset from the sides, and I can also just mirror a seam, just like that. It also has a lot of interesting and programmable features, which we will probably be taking a look at during this video. Seam selection is done through these buttons here. It has 10 by default. This one is straight stitching on something elastic, double straight, zigzag, etc. One of the things that this machine will do for you as the beginner, which is part of the reason why this is perhaps not ideal for someone that's learning, is that it will take a lot of the difficulty and guesswork out of it by making recommendations. For instance, you have down here the ability to select the type of fabric you want to be working with. You can have a non-elastic thin, says right here, although it says it in Swedish because it's a Swedish designed machine, and I'm Swedish and I like having machinery with my language. It's not common, so I will use it. So non-elastic thin, non-elastic normal, or non-elastic thick. So this one, for instance, you would have as a denim, let's say. This one would be your standard cotton woven. You can have stretchy fabric like fleece, thin, which would probably be for stuff like whatever those nylon stockings are made out of. I mean, obviously nylon, but I'm sure that there's a fancy name for it. Now the thing is, I have no real idea about sewing. If you come here and hope to learn something useful, maybe you will if you are a complete rookie at sewing, because I am a complete rookie. So the machine, it basically gives you recommendations depending on what you want to do. You can say that you want to do a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch, or like here, non-elastic normal, I want to stitch it together. It says put the A foot on, put an 80 gauge needle in, and so on and so forth. I want to, what do you say, do an overlock type of deal, like a zigzag to keep edges from fraying. Then it says, oh, put the J foot on, and just stuff like that. It's very helpful. It will also do recommendations for, like I mentioned, the foot, but it will also set the thread tension and such things based on what you have selected and the type of fabric you've selected. Which is fantastic, because it means you don't have to think about things like thread or foot tension, but as a drawback, it means you don't have to think about thread or foot tension, so you will not learn it. This is a problem for me. However, I thought, well, let's go big or go home when it comes to getting a sewing machine. My wife knows a lot more than I do, so she can teach me, and as a matter of fact, I thought, let's just get something nice that she can use. So, as we can see, lots of options, whole load of other buttons that I will probably be covering in due time. So I have been yammering on a little bit, so let's have a look at a bit of sewing, or rather, let's have a look at a couple of projects that I have done, so you can see the extent of my sewing career. Here's one of the first projects I ever did. It's a small bag, very small. Now what's the use? You can see it's looking a little bit unfinished, a bit rough, due to mistakes that happened in its manufacture and so on. But you might ask yourself, what is the use of this? Well, I was going out traveling, and I figured, well, I'll bring my Switch with me, but I didn't want the game to be hurt, so I made a pair of trousers, or a trouser for a Switch cartridge, so that the contacts would just not be laying around in the bag for the Switch. I made a couple of them, and then I realized that most of my games are downloadable and one of them fits in the Switch, but so it goes. For a first project, I think it's acceptable. It worked during my travels. It will probably fall apart at some point. My second project, however, is a little bit more advanced, I can say. My second project is this bag here. Now, this is a fancy sewing machine, and as you already saw from the computerized screen part, it has a lot of these various kinds of feet that you put onto it. I figure it's a hassle to have them loose in the bag, so I made a pouch for them. So, just like that, and I can easily pick out, I want the E foot because I'm doing a zipper. I want the D foot because I'm doing whatever it is the D foot is for. B foot for doing straight stitching on firmer fabric, for instance. So I thought that this was a convenient way to itemize them. And I didn't find a pattern online for this, I just sort of sat down, put my thinking cap on, and made the design. And that's going to be the topic of a future video series. How I went about deciding that I want this, how do I make it from scratch. And my third project, which was that we had a whole lot of fabric clips. So it's just a simple drawstring bag, so that they don't have to be around in the drawer where I keep all my sewing supplies just willy-nilly. So that is my entire tenure with sewing. Very, very unimpressive, very, for now, basic looking stuff, but I find it quite fun. And so now you know what level of experience I don't have. So let's actually have a look at the machine doing some sewing, and I will show you what it can do. Now then, like I'm sure I've mentioned before, this machine comes with plenty of buttons and plenty of fancy features. So for starters, let's just do a simple straight stitch. And I can just hold it here, and since the machine has electronic foot control, I can just push the button, fabric is firmly stuck in. It has an automatic fix feature that will make sure that the fabric or that the thread is firmly locked in place. It's got some thread cutting, which is pretty cool, but let's just have a look at it do its work. So with the fixing, it's going to do some stitching in place before the fabric will start to move, and then it'll just go. And if I would like to fix it afterwards, I would simply go on. I would push this button, I would push the stop so that the machine knows to stop when it's done with the fix, so just like this. And then I just press on the control, and the thread is now firmly locked in place. So what one does when you have finished a seam is to just cut the thread, and I can pull my workpiece out, and it will have pulled both of the threads to the back of the fabric so that it can just easily be cut with some snips later. Now let's have a rummage in here. We'll take out a couple of snips and just cut those off and leave them with the rest of the rubbish. And that creates a nice little seam. So those are the buttons I have at my disposal. Another thing that is quite useful is that I don't actually need to use any of the buttons to lower the foot. I can just set my workpiece up the way I want it to. I can push it down, but let's say that I want to make some careful adjustments. I can just raise the foot a little bit so I can see more clearly where the red mark ends up. So let's get a closer look. There we are, my workpiece is in place, the machine is set up to automatically affix it, so I will just push on the pedal and the machine will go. The machine also has a cool feature which is automatic half stitch, which means that if I just lightly tap the pedal, it's going to put the needle down, raise the foot, so I can just twist the piece and go in a different direction. And now I've made exactly 3 stitches, 2.5 millimeters each, and I can just go back up again. And then I can say push the fix button, I can push the stop button, and it affixes it. And then I just cut the thread, and the workpiece comes out. No problem whatsoever. Ready for cutting, and I have a beautiful slapdash seam. Why slapdash? Because, well, quite frankly, it's hard enough as it is to make something that is not slapdash as it is for me. It's even more difficult with a camera in my face, but such is the life of bringing machinery demos on YouTube. Without a camera in my face, it would be difficult to do the latter, in fact. Now, that being said, the machine also features a lot of other distinguished features. It has a myriad of decorative seams that I can just key into the machine and it will make them happen. One prime example would be, let's see, I just lowered it automatically, and I will try to program in a seam into the machine just for the fun of it, and I will select something nice. Yes, let's go with a strand of DNA. How can that be wrong? And then what I can do is, instead of using the foot control, I can just press the start button. and cut. And there we go. A nice DNA pattern printed. But of course, that's not really all you can do with a fancy machine like this. It has many other options that you can go with. So let's have a look at a few. So as we can see, the machine is saying that I need to use some backing material or support material. I criminally ignored this because, well, I'm lazy and it's a scrap piece. But it has a lot of interesting features like that. One of the things I can do is I can select an alphabet, and I'm sure that you see where this is going. So I just go in here and I select stuff that I would like to type, like the old tradition. Raise your hand in the comments if you are reminiscing of the old eras of video games where you would have to painstakingly input your name using these keyboards. C7. Like that. And then let's go with a cheerful exclamation mark. But not only that, we also want the machine to fix it, and we want it to cut the thread when it's done. So that's our program. The program is now done. It says that it will be 58.6 millimeters long, which is, well, it's about 6 centimeters or 3 inches if you happen to be into that particular scheme of measuring stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the material up and we will do something really neat. So here we are, machine is set up, material is in place. I'll just line it up nicely, lower the foot, and I'm just going to press the start button and let the machine do its thing automatically, like this. And thread cut. Hello folks, pleasure of you to join us today in this bit of interesting look at a vastly different kind of machinery than I normally cover. But let it be said that anything that is as computerized as this is bound to have some sort of calculator inside it, so I'm sure that you will give me a pass on this one. It is technically it is a calculator channel, it's still technically correct, and as the golden rule says, technically correct is the best kind of correct. Of course, as we can see, the fabric's been bunched a little bit and it's all scrunchy and stuff. That is because I was a crime who did not put in any backing material. Still pretty cool and quite useful for simple marking of stuff, if you're so inclined. For instance, you could take your friend's jacket and write a rude message on the back of it, and actually don't do that, that's quite rude, but potentially funny, depending on what you write and your sense of humor. However, that being said, this machine can do a lot of interesting things, and one of those things, let's actually look at making something that could conceivably, with a bit of a charitable mindset, be considered useful. So I'm going to make a very small drawstring bag with a piece of fabric that I have laying around just for your reference. There we are. I have cast a beautiful spell called Summon Fabric. This is a small square piece. It has a little bit of fraying along the edges, which is to be expected from raw fabric. I'm going to do a combined stitch together and overlocking maneuver to get these edges to be finished up nicely. First of all though, I'm going to put the fabric now. This is a woven. When you are making any sort of project, you usually want to sew it with the wrong side out or the right sides together. On this fabric there's not a particular difference between the right sides, but if you've ever worn a shirt inside out by mistake, then you have made the distinction between wrong and right sides together. So what we are going to do is that we're going to make a small bag looking roughly like so, and it's going to have a fold at the top. Now this will be slightly disproportional probably, but it will have a fold like this where the drawstrings will go. So I'm going to just mark it up like this, and I'm going to use these clamps instead of the pins, because I think that the clamps will go a lot better for the camera. So I'll just put a clamp on there, and another one right here. There we go, and that's mostly just to keep it in place. Otherwise I would just reinforce it with a couple of extras. So one reason that you would like to do this is that by clamping stuff you get a good feel for how it's going to look when it's stitched together. I mean, normally you would do this using pins, but in this way you have a good fixture for the sewing machine to work with, and you do not need to worry too much about the possible looks of whatever it is that you're making. So let's see here. Now these are going to go on the inside of the bag, so I'm not too concerned with the exact looks. So I'll put one on just here, and I'm going to put this other one on right there. So roughly even, probably not, no, a bit more space perhaps, like that. It's mostly just a demo either way, and then I need to give them a decent bit of a measure. So roughly 1.5 centimeters. One and a half. 1.5. I am good at eyeballing today. And not in the sense of putting drugs in your eyeballs either. That's not the kind of eyeballing we do on this channel. There we go. I will drop the workpiece, and then I'm going to just head on over to the machine, or well, I'm going to put it in the machine and do some sewing on it. So let me reposition my camera and we'll be right back. There we are. The camera has been repositioned. The machine has been set up for straight stitch. So I'm going to put the workpiece into the machine and lower the presser foot. Raise it just slightly so I can push it just a bit further into the machine. Lower it again and remove the first of these two, which is mostly just for holding things together. And then I'm going to bring on, there we are, let me perhaps not hide what I'm doing from you. That would sort of defeat the purpose of this whole exercise, I would think. So I will just start going. And since I would rather not buy a new one of the clamps, I'll just take this one off away, or off as well. And then get all set up to press the fix button. There we are. So it's been sewn together. I'll press fix and stop, and I'll just have the machine fix the thread in place and cut. So there's the first seam in the bag. Pretty decent, though this sometimes happens. I'm not entirely sure why. It's a bit annoying when it just straight up decides that, oh, I'm going to make a big old loop on your project. Thankfully, it's usually pretty simple to untangle with an unpicker, but I digress. Let's continue on to the other side. Not in the let's die sense of the word. That would be unfortunate, but rather let's sew the other end of the bag. Like that, and then let's hit the gas pedal to the metal. I have to admit that I really quite appreciate the noise sewing machines make while working. Uh-oh. Let's see, can you do this? You can probably, yeah. And then cut. And it came out with the seemingly same issue as before. Big old knot at the start, but that's pickable. It's pickable, but not despicable. It's a bit uneven. Perhaps I'm not super satisfied with how that is, but it is how things are. So on that note, I'm now going to fold it up together like this, and then I'm going to put the clamps in place. Just like that. Then I'm going to tell the machine that I would like to sew things together and do an adjustment for the sides as well. With a slight variation so that it will there. So now what it's going to do is that it's going to create a seam that also prevents fraying on the inside of the bag. So let's just get this show on the road. And I will take this off, and then fix it. See, I would have thought that it was going to be cool about it, but there we are. Hideous little seam, but this is going to end up on the inside of the bag when all is said and done. So let's go on to the other side. Same deal as before. Slight adjustment. and then let's go. Clamp comes away. And then fix it. And cut. There we are. 2 hideously uneven seams. But thankfully, it's not the end of the world. Which is good, because if the end of the world would come about, then I wouldn't really see a point in making this video. It would be a bit ridiculous and a strange choice in priorities. So, away with the wanton threads that just get left over. And as we can see now, these seams, the overlocking seams, are sort of stopping the fraying, because the side threads just have a hard time coming out past them, which is going to make the inside of the bag a lot nicer to deal with. But just tidying it up. Snip, snip. Let's not snip too much. And there we are. One peculiar looking bag. But like I mentioned, it's not supposed to be used in this way. Instead, like most sewing projects, it's supposed to be inverted. So with a little bit of fuzzing, it will come out and become something that you would perhaps think is not entirely awful. I mean, it's not super even, but that's on me being a complete rookie. So if anybody would like to share in the comments what a horrible bastard I am for making you sit through a sewing machine video and this is the end result, then by all means, you have probably earned that right by now. So, here's the bag, here's the channels for the drawstrings, so let's apply some drawstrings. The mysteries of drawstring application. To apply a drawstring, you will need string, you will need not draw, you'll need some scissors, and you'll need a lighter. To measure out your drawstring, you're going to need 2 lengths, roughly, each of them should be roughly this long. Should be enough that you will be able to comfortably make a knot around the bag. So I'm going to take these, roughly that long, and just cut it. Measure out another length, same one. There are 2 approaches to putting a drawstring into a bag. The first one is to do, now this is a pretty slippery thread, so it'll probably work out to just push it through. You'll find that if your thread is a bit more feisty, this is an unpleasant option to use. So then there are tools you can get, which is basically a long plastic doodad that looks vaguely like the thing you used when you were blowing soap bubbles. If you haven't been blowing soap bubbles, then there's a life experience that you've sorely missed out on. But I will not judge. But you basically just pull the thread through, put the tool through the bag and pull the tool along with the drawstring straight through. You then straighten out the drawstring so that it is of roughly equal length, like, I was going to say like so, but it seems to be misbehaving somewhat. There we are. And then it's a matter of just making a... I forgot one step in between, but it worked out for me this time. However, this is where the lighter comes in. You need to make sure that your edges are slightly melted. This is a polyester type thread. And the reason is that otherwise they will fray and come apart and you will be a sad camper. So, a little bit of fluff fire. Handle like marshmallows. You don't need a lot. Don't touch it when you've just burned on it. Hot plastic is, as you might think, quite hot. Same with marshmallows, really. You don't want melted sugar at the roof of your mouth, because the roof of your mouth will then register a formal complaint and you will be terribly unhappy. There we are. Two melted together ends. So, cools down reasonably quickly, has a nice, probably difficult to see, but it has one of them has a slightly nice golden brown side, also like marshmallows. So that is, in case someone is talking to you about the Maillard reaction, now you know what it's all about. It's that you want the most delicious drawstrings that you can possibly get. And the Maillard reaction is key to that. You then just take the two ends and you tie them into a simple overhand knot with both of them side by side. Optional step is to burn on the knots, but I would like to save that until I've applied the second drawstring. The second drawstring was incidentally hiding out on the floor, presumably fearing a fire-related fate. Little did the drawstring know that it was indeed entirely correct, but in a much sooner than its friend. So, handle like marshmallows again. Takes very gentle heat. A small blob will form on the end when you're done. It's about preventing fraying, not about killing any bacteria on it, to make sure that your drawstring will not give you salmonella. However, if for whatever reason you are concerned, then you should make sure that you don't try to use this method to prevent botulism, because botulism, if your food has it, it's already too late, because botulism is actually caused by toxins from bacteria and not the bacteria themselves, which is interesting, but I'm curious as to how it's relevant to a video on the topic of sewing. If you know how it's relevant to a video on the topic of sewing, please feel free to let me know in the comments, because, quite frankly, I don't know. Why did I even bring it up? Then again, I've pulled the drawstring through the bag, and I'll bring it back in with the tool. It's being a little bit feistily, but there we go. So, straighten it out just like before, and I will do the simple overhand knot again. And of course, when you're doing this overhand knot, you want to be absolutely sure that you are as close to the edge of the string as possible when you finish the knot, so that you'll have less loose ends to deal with. as a lot of action movie villains will tell you, no loose ends. And it's a good thing to live by. Now then, let's see here. There's one drawstring bag. When fully opened, the drawstrings are hardly visible. Or, I mean, they're sticking out, they're big lumps, but they're not in the way. And when closed up, the bag is extremely closed. You will not be getting anything out of this anytime soon. So, now I have a drawstring bag of questionable quality with some random strings stored inside it. What will I use this for? Well, truth being told, I didn't really have any sort of idea, but then I realized that, hey, I don't have any place to actually keep the switch cartridges beyond straight up inside the box itself. So why not put my now be-pantsed switch cartridge in here, and then simply put the drawstring bag inside the box with the switch, and I know where the games are. Yeah, that's not a terrible idea actually. I think I'm going to do that. Well, now that I've sewn this together, I can't exactly stitch on a games label on it. That's a shame, but that's what I get for not knowing what I wanted to accomplish with my project before accomplishing it. On that note, I hope it's been interesting, and if you're interested in more sewing videos called Complete Rookie Sews, then please feel free to give me some input in the comments. I will be sure to read it. If you would like to ridicule my sewing technique, you're also very welcome to do so, but I don't know what it will achieve, because anything you can tell me I already know, at least with regards to that. If you have helpful sewing tips, however, then please be my guest. Thank you very much for watching.